hush before dawn clung to Winterfell like a spun silver veil, moonlight lingering pale upon the snow-draped merlons, while hearth smoke coiled lazily from the chimneys below. Frost creaked in the joints of shuttered windows and turned every breath to drifting ghosts. Somewhere beyond the inner ward, a lone guard's boot scraped stone, the sound swallowed almost at once by the vast white stillness. In that fragile momentary suspension between night's dominion and the first gray ember of morning, the castle felt older than its foundations, as though it had slumbered here since the making of the world and would outlast the crumbling of all empires. Beneath the curtain wall's shadow, red lanterns guttered in their cages, throwing wan starbursts across the bailey. Only the godswood stood truly alive, its boughs stirring in a wind too secret for mortal flesh to feel. There, across the thin crust of frozen snow, Ghost padded without sound, fur the color of new fallen flakes, eyes aglow like twin embers banked to cunning heat. He moved with a predator's easy grace. Yet, there was something restless beneath the smooth command of muscle and sinew, as though the darkness itself whispered after him, half afraid and half in longing. Ghost halted at the weirwood gate, muzzle lifted to the perfumed air. The scent of sap, resin, and the slow exhalations of ancient earth filled his nostrils. Yet beyond those familiar threads ran subtler strands, a musk carried on a far-off breeze, the old blood of wolves he had never met, and a pulse of wildness that thrummed like war drums under the skin of the land. His ears flicked. Snow sifted from a low branch in gentle applause. For an instant, the direwolf's pupils widened, swallowing the red glow until his gaze mirrored the black of night itself. He tasted something upon that air. Distance unwound, a cry at once foreign and kinbound, calling across woodland hollows and frozen rivers. Another would have mistaken it for wind. Ghost felt it for what it was, a heartbeat inside his own, a tether tugging at the very marrow of his bones. Jon Snow watched from beneath the heart tree, cloak drawn close against the chill, the pale glow of the moon painting stark edges upon his face. Sleep had been a stranger to him these many nights. His rest broke too easily, fractured by dreams half-remembered, images of endless winter forests and luminous eyes watching through the dark. He knew what they signified. The line between his own mind and Ghost's had ever been a flickering veil, and lately that veil had thinned to a whisper. He could sense the wolf even now. The flutter of nostrils, the burn of cold air in feral lungs, the scan of sharp ears over distant snowfields. It should have frightened him, this mingling of selves. But what Jon felt instead was a gathering expectancy, as though he stood upon the edge of something vast and strange, a precipice hidden in starlight. He spoke no word, for words were brittle things beside the ancient tongue of scents and footfalls. Instead, Jon rested a gloved hand upon the heart tree's pale bark. The rough surface felt warm despite the frost, its surface throbbing with a pulse older than any house or banner. Bran claimed the trees remembered. Tonight Jon half believed it. When his palms settled flat, a shiver of song seemed to hum through the heart tree, and into his own blood, threading him to depths he could not name. In that hum lived the memory of wolf howls ringing under broken moonlight, of a brood once 6 and now scattered. Nymeria lost to the trident woods, Shaggy Dog's ghost haunting shattered Skagos, summer silent in the snows beyond the wall, gray wind forever running fields of summer grass in some kinder realm. Only Ghost remained at Jon's side, yet the pack bond lingered, frayed but unbroken. That bond, Jon sensed, was stirring tonight. He recalled the tales old Nan once wove of the Stark forebears, skin-changers who rode through the veins of direwolves and hawks, of their eyes turning to moonlit glass, while their bodies lay winter cold. Jon had always listened in secret dread, for a bastard's heart is taught to fear desires it cannot name. Now the dread felt distant. He had crossed too many borders, the wall, death itself, and returned, changed. The power sleeping in him no longer lurked at the edges. It paced beneath his skin, hungry and bright. On some nights, he drifted into Ghost without meaning to, waking with blood upon his tongue and distant scents folded into memory. Yet tonight, something inside Ghost felt larger, as though the direwolf carried not merely his own mind and Jon's, but the echoing chorus of other hearts beating in tandem, scattered like sparks across the north's frozen span. Claws whispered over snow. Ghosts loped past the weirwood, white fur gilded by fading moonshine, heading for the breach in the gatehouse where the outer world waited. John hesitated only a breath before following, snow crunching beneath his boots. Torchlight flared above the ramparts, and a sentry's voice called down, muffled by a scarf of wool. John lifted a hand in greeting but did not pause. The guard knew better than to bar the king in the north from his own gates at cockcrow, direwolf, or no doubt. Still, John sensed curious eyes track him, and he wondered how strange he must appear. A man chasing his wolf through Prudon hush as though he, too, was bound to a leash invisible. Ghost led him beyond the walls, across the drawbridge etched with rime, down into the stables where steam rose from the nostrils of shaggy garrons. A stable hand snored upon a bale of straw, oblivious as the direwolf slipped past the stalls, nose low, tracing a path only he could see. John followed, fingers brushing iron-shod stall doors, warmth from the beasts' heavy bodies curling against his knees. The horses sensed Ghost and stamped uneasily, yet the white wolf spared them not a glance. His attention lay elsewhere, drawn like iron to lodestone. John felt the tug as well. A pulse, faint but insistent, thrumming behind his sternum. They emerged at the far paddock where fresh snow lay unspoiled. Ghost paused, raised his snout to the stars. The breath he exhaled fluttered with sparks of fur. A moment later, the silence broke, soft at first, then spreading like ripples on a frozen pond. A howl rising from deep in Ghost's chest, lifting into the sky with aching purity. John's skin prickled. That sound was command and mourning all at once, a summons no northern beast would ignore. He felt impossibly voices answering across the black distance. One near the Wolf's Wood fringe, another far along the King's Road, and more still, faint but distinct. Each answer pitched at subtle intervals, until the night itself rang with polyphonic promise. Ghost's head lowered. His ember eyes burned with sudden knowing, and in that knowing John glimpsed what Ghost glimpsed. A scatter of minds across snowbound leagues, turning northward as one. He staggered as the connection widened, as though his own skull were flung open to the winter sky. For a breath he stood inside many bodies. A gray flank streaking beneath sentinel pines, a coal-black muzzle dripping river water, a half-grown pup with mismatched eyes blinking at the cold. He tasted their hungers. Rabbit fur between teeth, the salt of blood on snow. And beneath those primal urges lay a deeper impulse, newly kindled. The call to gather. It was Ghost's call, yet more than Ghost's. A tide of certainty swept through them, forging a unity older than words. The surge receded, leaving John gasping. He clenched gloved fingers into the wool of his cloak, steadying himself. Ghost trotted back, pressed his massive head against John's thigh. The touch grounded him, but the echo of so many lives lingered in his mind like the afterimage of sun across closed eyelids. He knelt, burying his hands in Ghost's ruff, feeling the heat of a heart that beat now for many. "What are you becoming?" he whispered. Ghost's only answer was a low rumble, half purr, half thundercloud. The dawn bled slowly over the battlements when John at last returned to the great hall, though warmth from the towering hearths seemed pale beside the secret fire that burned inside his chest. He found Sansa there, wrapped in a cloak of russet sable, conferring with Maester Wolken over supply ledgers. Her head turned at his entrance, auburn hair catching firelight. She studied him with that gentle gravity she wielded like a queen's scepter. "You look as though you have been running all night," she said. John offered a tight smile. "Only following a friend." He thought to speak more, but the words faltered. What could he say that would not sound mad? Sansa's gaze lingered, yet she pressed no further, merely instructed a waiting steward to fetch him mulled wine. The taste of spice and honey could not chase the wolf howl from his tongue. Bran arrived before noon, wheeled in by Podrick Payne. Snow lay thick on the boy's shoulders, the folds of his faded cloak. His expression bore the far-seeing calm John had learned to dread. Those pale eyes seemed too wide for mortal sight, as though they drank the world's secret currents, and found them wanting. When the others departed, Bran gestured for John to lean close. "You felt it last night," he murmured. It was not a question. John swallowed. What is it, Bran? The younger Stark's fingers brushed the carved armrest of his chair in a slow, thoughtful rhythm. A knot tightening. Threads of old magic, forgotten in men's tongues. Wolves remember. He turned his head, gaze sliding to Ghost where the direwolf lay curled near the hearth. One eye slid open like a blood-red crescent. He is calling them home. John's voice roughened. Home to what? Bran's answer was softer than snowfall. To war, perhaps. Or to something beyond war. The land itself is stirring. Winter has ended, yet the scars remain. Something in the heart of the North seeks to heal, and for that, it needs its guardians. Jean thought of the howls weaving through the night sky, and of the sense, impossibly, of minds yoking together. You speak as though Ghost commands them. Not commands, Bran corrected, leads. They choose to follow, and in choosing they become more than pack. Bran's lashless stare fixed John. And you, brother, are woven into that choice. Ghost is not separate from you, not truly. Damn. And the day passed in ordinary labors, provision tallies, training rounds in the yard. But John moved through it in a haze, conscious always of something vast uncoiling beneath the mundane. At odd hours a shiver would rake his spine, and he knew another wolf had scented the call, turning its paws toward Winterfell. By dusk, riders from Deepwood Motte arrived with tidings. Livestock found dead on the western ridges, yet untouched save for a single puncture at the throat. Kills made clean, almost reverent, tracks of a great pack vanishing into pine shadow. Lady Glover's messenger spoke half in awe, half dread. Not a rabbit disturbed aside from the offering. John dismissed the man with thanks, his pulse drumming hard. Wolves marking territory, signaling fealty. That night, he did not resist when Ghost brushed the door to his chambers and stalked out into moon-washed corridors. John followed barefoot, tunic thrown over rough-spun breeches. They slipped from keep to courtyard, from courtyard to Godswood, where the heart tree's red leaves rustled like the murmur of solemn priests. Ghost paused but did not linger. His path lay northward, through the postern gate Bran had commanded left unbarred. Beyond the walls, the sky opened like a cathedral, constellations blazing cold and clear. Ghost's stride lengthened, silent as snowmelt. John kept pace, lungs burning with the sting of night air. They crossed fields where the stubble of last year's wheat jutted through crusted drifts, ghostly under the stars. Far ahead, the edge of the Wolf's Wood loomed, trunks black against a horizon painted with faint aurora. As they neared, Ghost slowed. John sensed presences before he saw them. Shadows gliding between trees, eyes reflecting starlight. Then shapes emerged, direwolves, 3 at first, then 5, then more, slipping from darkness as though woven by the night itself. Their sizes varied. One enormous gray with frost-rimmed fur, another lean and sooty, a dappled bitch whose coat shimmered silver blue. They came without snarl or challenge, spreading in a semicircle. Ghost lifted his tail, not dominant so much as declarative. We are one. John's heart hammered, yet terror did not claim him. The wolf's presence felt inevitable, like the turning of seasons. Ghost stepped forward. The others mirrored his movement, and in the space between them something unseen ignited. A tether of thought, a braid of instincts binding tight. John's vision flickered. He saw through a dozen eyes at once, smelled the musk of pine and distant elk, tasted old blood on cold fangs. Each sense layered upon the next until reality blurred, vast and honey-thick. In that synesthetic storm, John perceived arcs of will knitting outward, joining still other wolves far off, along the White Knife's glacial banks, atop the lonely barrows of the rills, stalking peat bogs of Flint's Finger, all turning toward this gathering at the heart of the North. Time lost meaning. Whether minutes or hours passed he could not know. At some silent accord Ghost broke the tableau, leading deeper into the wood. John followed, the pack flowing around him like pale river mist. No branch cracked, no snowbank crumbled. They were a single body with 100 beating hearts. In that unity, John sensed something more than the will of beasts. A purpose burgeoning, undefined yet resolute. The north had bled. The ground remembered battles of ice and fire. Now it sought guardians immune to the ambitions of men. They came at length to a clearing where moonlight spilled silver upon an ancient barrow mound, its earthen slopes crusted with hoarfrost. Ghost ascended first, planting broad paws upon weather-worn stones, inset with swirling runes. John followed, breath steaming. When he reached the summit, the pack formed a ring below, their gaze fixed upon him and Ghost. He felt raw beneath the scrutiny, as though the wolves weighed his very blood. Ghost turned to him, eyes blazing crimson. In their depths, John beheld not merely the animal, but a mirror of his own soul. Torn between man and wild, wearing both skins and belonging wholly to neither. A gust of wind spiraled across the barrow, scattering dead leaves like rusted coins. The sound they made was almost like words in an elder tongue he did not know. Ghost threw back his head and howled. One by one the wolves joined, voices rising to weave a tapestry of sounds so solemn it bordered on sacred. John felt the song enter him, thread through bones and sinew, down to the trembling root of his heart. Vision blurred, he saw the north in panorama. Frosted rivers gleaming like pewter serpents, weirwoods peppering black forests with red stars. The walls pale immensity, casting long shadows where free folk burned pyres for lost kin. Direwolves coursed across that land in luminous skeins, their howls ghosting through the aurora, weaving protection over every wild acre. And at the weave's center stood Ghost, white, radiant, indomitable, binding the pack to one intent. When the last echo died, Ghost lowered his head. The pack dispersed into the trees, not with haste but calm certainty, bearing with them the spark of the new order. John sank to his knees upon the frosted stone, a tremor rolling through him. He was empty and full at once, scraped clean by wonder. Ghost came to his side and pressed his snout beneath John's hand. The contact tethered him back to flesh, the pulsing warmth of life. John stroked the wolf's fur, words unneeded between them. They lingered until the pale blush of dawn tinged the eastern sky. The return to Winterfell was silent, yet everything felt changed. John sensed watchful eyes in every snowbank, a silent oath humming beneath the land. He had glimpsed a power neither crown nor sword could command, a covenant, older than kings. As he crossed the drawbridge, the first light of sunrise caught the battlements, glinting like embers upon stone. In that glow, Ghost's shadow stretched long upon the courtyard, and within its borders other shadows flared, indistinct yet unmistakable. The echo of many wolves running beside their white-furred leader, unseen by sentries, but not by John's waking soul. The king in the north paused, head bowed in reverence, for he knew that from this dawn onward, Winterfell's banners flew beside a vaster, wilder heraldry. The silent standard of tooth and claw, of eyes like red moons burning in the endless dark. Inika and Din. Snow whispered against the shutters of the solar like moth wings before dawn, a soft hush that found every crack in the ancient timbers and probed the warmth within. John sat at the trestle table with parchment unrolled before him, quill poised yet unmoving. The candle at his elbow sputtered in a slow-burning halo. Wax dripped and hardened in stalactites along the iron holder, marking the hours since he had first taken up his seat and tried to summon words for the northern lords. How did one explain that a power older than their houses now patrolled their borders? That silent shapes wove unseen circles around crofts and barns, judging, guarding, nursing some instinctual covenant? He dipped the quill and set nib to vellum once more. Lords of the North, I bid you attend. The phrase clanked against his ear like ill-forged mail. Too stiff, too human. He scratched a line through the salutation, leaned back, and pressed thumb and forefinger into the sockets of his eyes. In the hearth, embers collapsed with a quiet hiss, white wood collapsing to ruby coals. Ghost lay stretched beside the fire, one massive paw over his muzzle. He had slept thus since they returned, but sleep was a shallow tide for him now. John could feel the direwolf's wakeful watch within, circling like a slow moon around his thoughts. From time to time Ghost's ears flicked at inaudible sounds beyond the walls. a restless map of movement only he could sense. The latch clicked. Sansa glided in, her cloak glimmering silver where frost clung to the fox fur trim. She paused, letting the door settle behind her without a bang. "You missed the morning council," she said. Jon opened his eyes, found her gaze steady, neither reprimand nor pity, merely fact. "I tried to write," he murmured. "The right words won't come." Sansa crossed to the window slit, brushed fingers along the cold stone. Perhaps there aren't words yet. Not for something this different. She watched Ghost for a moment, something like wonder stirring behind blue eyes. A groom swears he saw a dozen direwolves along the eastern palisade before sunrise. They vanished when he ran for help. She turned toward Jon. "Was it?" "Yes," he said. "Or part of it." He did not attempt to parse the arrangement. Even in his mind, the structure of the pack felt fluid. A living current changed from moment to moment. Sansa folded arms beneath her cloak. "There's talk already. Some fear an omen of doom. Others say the old gods walk again." Jon's quill clattered back into the inkwell, splashing a black tear that spread across the parchment. "What do you believe?" he asked. She shook her head, auburn hair shifting like embers. "Belief is a mirror, Jon. Show someone their terror, and they will call it truth. Show them hope, and they will kneel." She drew nearer, lowered her voice. "But I do trust you, and Ghost. That will have to be enough for the rest of them, for now." He took her hand, rough calluses brushing silk-soft skin. "Thank you." Sansa gave a faint smile and withdrew. At the door she paused. "Maester Walken expects a new litter of piglets at the Glass Gardens come spring. Make certain your wolves don't frighten the small folk." "I'll try," Jon said, unsure entirely how one gave orders to creatures whose minds ran like wind through pine. When the door closed, he let the silence resettle, heavy as a mantle. Deep wood dusk arrived soon after midday. Clouds pressed low, bruised with snow yet to fall. Jon gathered cloak and gloves, slipped into the corridor. Torchlight cast fitful shadows. Once or twice he imagined additional footsteps pacing his own. Yet every time he spun about the passage lay empty, but for wavering flame. At the yard he found lines of men drilling beneath Sir Davos' watchful eye, their breath puffing white as they clashed dulled blades. Davos hailed him, one eyebrow lifting in silent question, but Jon only raised a gloved hand in acknowledgement before slipping past to the godswood. Bran waited beside the heart tree, wrapped in gray furs, Podrick standing sentinel at his back. Snow lay soft upon Bran's hair like a crown of ghost feathers. His eyes tracked crows as they hopped along branches overhead. When Jon approached, Bran spoke first. "The land is listening," he said, voice quiet. "To the wolves." Bran's pale eyebrows dipped in a motion that might have been a shrug. "To everything. The ground remembers what bled into it. Blood, sorrow, fire. Now there's new song in its veins. Change thrums under every stone." Jon felt a chill that had little to do with cold. "Is this change dangerous?" Bran's gaze fixed on him, deep, disconcerting. "Change is neither safe nor unsafe. But anything powerful enough to weave so many lives together can be mistuned." Jon's jaw tightened. "How do we keep it in harmony then?" "You begin by listening," Bran replied. "Listen as the wolves listen, not with ears." He touched the weirwood trunk. Red sap oozed where his fingertips pressed, glistening like garnet tears. "Will you keep watch with Ghost tonight?" Jon nodded. "I think I must." Bran looked satisfied. "Then perhaps the song will tell you what it needs." Twilight found the northern sky a tattered banner of purple and brass. Torches bloomed along every walkway, though their radiance seemed small against the towering dark. Jon donned a heavier cloak and descended toward the kennels, where Ghost stood waiting, hackles rippling at some unheard signal. A stable hand saw them pass, and blessed himself in the manner of the old gods. Hand to heart, lips, forehead. Ghost's breath plumed in the lantern glow, eyes glimmering ember red. They exited by the sally port and faded into the night. Jon had brought no lantern. The wolves needed none, and some instinct urged him not to foul the dark with man-made flame. The snowfields held their own hoarded glow. a lambent sheen reflecting starlight. As they crossed an iced stream, Ghost paused. Ears pricked, gaze distant, he tilted his head. John felt the pull an instant later. A tremor along the invisible thread connecting them. A beckoning like a chord struck upon a mountain-sized harp. Ghost answered with a low, chest-deep bark. The sound rolled outward, soft yet carrying. Shapes emerged from the tree line. First two, then more. One great black brute with a scarred muzzle, followed by a pale female almost ghost size. Then a pair of yearlings whose play-snaps cracked like dry twigs. John's breath caught. Everyone bore the direwolf's colossal proportions, though their pelts ranged over grays and browns and a dusk-tinted gold. They formed ranks unspoken, flanking Ghost and John, as though escorting royalty. The pup nearest John sniffed at his boots, tail whipping a small trench in the powder before bounding ahead. Together they moved into the wolf's woods, deeper hollows. Each tree trunk stood like a dark sentinel, branches bearing lacy drapes of hoarfrost. John's feet crunched, but the wolves floated, silent as exhaled breath. Hours might have passed, or minutes. Night in the forest was timeless. When the wolves halted, John found himself before a weather-split oak whose vast roots parted around a shallow pool, not yet frozen despite the season. Steam rose from the mirror-black surface. Ghost approached the lip and drank. The others waited, as if by right. John crouched, dipped gloved fingertips into the water. Warmth tingled. A natural spring, perhaps fed by hidden fissures. But beyond the physical heat there lay something else. A hum he sensed in his bones, the same thrumming Bran had named. Ghost lifted his head, muzzle dripping silver droplets. He gazed into the water, eyes reflecting twin moons. John leaned closer and saw not his own face, but a scroll of images shifting like painted mist. Crannogmen slipping canoes through bog fog. A white elk pausing before a stone circle in the rills. A cluster of knights, watch recruits, staring skyward as green flames streaked beyond the wall. A Raya, hair ragged, leaning over her mare's neck somewhere in the riverlands. Lips parted in sudden walk. John jerked away, sensation flooding back. His breath came quick. Ghost nuzzled his shoulder, as though to steady him. The wolves circled the pool, lowering bodies to haunches, forming a loose wheel with Ghost opposite John. Silence rooted them. John felt a soft invasion of awareness, not forcible, rather a trickle, wolves sharing glimpses. A rabbit's heartbeat before the pounce, the taste of birch bark on winter teeth, the satisfaction of fresh snow under padded paws. But layered beneath these primal thrills lay another current, concern, searching. He perceived images of men toiling under sledges, hauling timber southward. Glimpses of smoke pillars rising over mountain passes where free folk camps clustered. Charred patches in the tundra, where once the living burned their dead enemies to ash. The wolves tracked these things, trying to map meaning. John closed his eyes, let his mind drift. He floated on their sensory tide, and when the tide drew back he remained within only one pair of eyes. Ghosts. The shift came without effort now. He saw himself crouching across the spring, face pale, hair black as a raven's wing. Ghost's body felt coiled with vigor, muscle thrumming, senses inhumanly sharp. He smelled the leather of John's gloves, the faint note of bay leaves from the castle kitchen still clinging to Joan's cloak. Beyond that, distant fox musk, iron tang of buried ore veins, sap bleeding where a branch had broken in the wind. His hearing swept the forest like a fan, vole tunneling far underground, an owl pivoting its head atop a broken birch, the heartbeat of water deeper under rock. He, host, they, rose and paced the circle, the other wolves dipping muzzles in greeting. No challenge here. They acknowledged a rightness to his position, a pivot around which their instincts aligned. Ghost turned back to John, and a spark leapt across the space. Promise. Protect. Gather. Heal. Images blossomed, packs fanning through each northern holdfast, culling sickly deer herds to spare villages from starvation, frightening off lone brigands who prowled winter-hard roads, resting unseen outside crofters' doors until dawn. They would not be tamed, but they would watch, and in watching men a balance broken by the wars of man and ice alike. Jon blinked and the dual vision collapsed. He stood again in his own flesh. The wolves rose. Ghost brushed past him, leading from the glade. One by one the others followed. But they did not scatter. Instead they moved in loose file, like outriders waiting for the commander's next word. Jon followed, though now he sensed pathway more than saw it. The route laid bare inside his mind as well as in snow. They crossed a ridge and descended into a valley where wind had carved sweeping dunes at tree line's edge. Moonlight revealed another gathering. Wolves new to him. Sleek, river-fed brutes with dripping coats, mountain-born beasts with stone-gray pelts, waiting in respectful hush. Ghost wove among them, exchanging quick touches of nose to shoulder. The new arrivals dispersed into smaller knots, slipping silent into pre-chosen lanes of darkness. It was a deployment. In their passing, Jon felt an elegant choreography, each wolf aware of its neighbor, yet free to roam. The pack existed as lattice work, flexible, complex, ordained by shared intuition. When finally Ghost turned back toward Winterfell, dawn's first paling hint hovered above the eastern horizon. By the time they neared the walls, exhaustion Jon scarcely recognized weighted his limbs. He had walked many leagues yet felt he had traveled further inside his own head. The wolves melted into shadows at the tree line, save for Ghost. On Rampart, watchmen stared at the white Direwolf and his tall companion in weary astonishment. Jon nodded but said no word. Ghost padded through the gates as if he owned them. Word traveled faster than ravens could fly. By midday, lords from White Harbor to the last river sent messages seeking explanation or blessing. Walken stacked the scrolls on Jon's table until the pile resembled a small fortress. The scent of hot wax turned Jon's stomach, so he retreated to the training yard where Arya's laughter arrested him. Bright, improbable. She stood on packed snow sparring with Brienne, wooden swords clacking. Arya's eyes sparkled, hair fallen loose from binding. Jon's heart swelled. He had not known she was closer than the twins. He opened his mouth to hail her, but Ghost bounded ahead, tail high, and Arya whipped around, blade dropping. "Ghost!" she cried, kneeling as the wolf shouldered against her. Snow flew as she wrapped arms about his neck. Jon approached. Before he could speak, Arya glanced up, cheeks flushed. "He's calling Nymeria," she said as though no greeting were needed. Jon blinked. "You feel it too. She's coming?" Arya answered simply. "I dreamed of her ford crossing the Green Fork with half the Riverlands following." She rose, Brienne stepping aside. "Wherever you and Ghost go, I think Nymeria means to join." Ghost's ears twitched. He bumped Arya once, then turned, trotting toward the Great Hall. Jon and Arya exchanged glances. Arya tossed her practiced sword to Podrick, who bobbled the catch, and together they followed the White Wolf within. Inside, Bran waited at the base of the dais, Sansa at his right, Davos at his left. Glovermen and Manderly guards stood along the walls, tense. Atop the high table, an enormous map had been unfurled. Cloth painted with house sigils, trade routes, watchtowers. Ghost padded directly onto the fabric and seated himself upon the marks denoting the King's Road. Jon opened his mouth to scold before realizing Ghost's hindquarters obscured 3 painted symbols of direwolf heads. Bran lifted a palm. "You see where he sits," Bran said. "The road unites holds, but also brings strangers. The pack secures the spine first." Davos cleared his throat. "Secures how, my lord? If every merchant that rides north is greeted by a mouthful o' fangs, no fangs," Arya interjected. "Not unless needed. They watch." Sansa surveyed the room, measuring each face. "Rumor spreads already. We must shape what tale reaches their ears. Wolves keeping watch for the good of the realm will sit better than omens of doom." Jon stepped to the table. "Agreed. But tell them more. That the North guarded man in the long ago, and now the old ways wake again to shield us while we rebuild." He laid a hand on Ghost's shoulder. "Wolf and map alike. We owe them respect, not fear." Davos' furrowed brow softened. "Aye, lad, and a fair telling it will be. But some still follow the Seven, and they'll want holy men's blessings." He glanced sideways at Sansa. She nodded. Sir Davos, draft a proclamation. We'll send singing septons with it if we must, but the heart of it stands. The Direwolves are under the king's protection, and the king under theirs. Bran spoke then, words quiet but carrying. The wolves will need food. At the scowl from Lord Glover's captain he added, they won't take your herds if you offer tribute first. Cull the sick goats, the weak pigs, what would die come next freeze. Lay them at God's wood roots under the new moon. The wolves will understand the gesture and pass your farms by. Glover's man swallowed but said nothing. Sansa met his gaze until he nodded stiff acceptance. Arya paced the edge of the map, finger tracing the neck. How far does Ghost's call reach? Across ice and ocean soon enough, Bran murmured. But the strongest bonds follow our blood. Nymeria will bring her own brood, and with her the forests of the Trident will open paths unseen by men since first Storm Kings passed. He looked to Arya. When she comes, you may ride with her if you choose. Arya's eyes gleamed dangerously. I just might. Jon studied his siblings, each marked by divergent journeys, now converging on this strange frontier where beast and heartwood shaped fate. He felt a deep thrum of belonging tempered by foreboding. We should fortify abandoned watchposts, he said. If wolves patrol between them, we can rest men at intervals, keep supply lines open. The pack's routes might guide us to which towers still stand strong. Ghost's tail swept the map, smearing a blot of soot across the patch of the Dreadfort. Bran's gaze sharpened. Bolton lands lie uneasy. There is rot still festering under new banners. Sansa's jaw tightened. Then we cut it out, with tooth, talon, and sword as needed. 3 days later, the snow began in earnest. Fine crystals whipped sideways by a frigid wind that keened across battlements like lost souls. Despite the gale, work crews trundled out beneath canvas wraps to reinforce the ruined watchtower at Flint's Finger. Jon rode among them atop a shaggy Garin, Ghost trotting ahead. Each time the wind veered, Jon saw wolves appear at the edge of his vision, gone again before he could count them. One sturdy she-wolf remained in clear sight, yellow-eyed, with a patch of white on her throat. She kept pace, neither friend nor foe, simply companion on the road. At Flint's Finger, they found the tower leaning but intact, the interior choked with rubble from past fires. As men cleared debris, Jon walked the perimeter. The she-wolf followed, sniffing charred beams. He knelt and extended a hand. She approached cautiously, touched nose to glove, then slipped away. Ghost watched without jealousy. Jon sensed an unspoken decree. The she-wolf belonged here now, sentinel of rocky shores. Work progressed through the afternoon. By dusk, fresh support beams buttressed the tower's western wall, and a small cache of dried fish and oats had been stowed inside for passing patrols. When the time came to leave, Ghost howled once. From nearby crags, 2 more wolves answered. They joined a yellow-eyed sentinel, forming a trio that watched men depart before loping into lengthening shadows. That night, in camp, Jon dreamt not of swords or kingdoms, but of rivers under moonlight. He was many bodies, sleek forms cutting through black water, legs stroking in perfect rhythm. Banks rushed by, lit by ghost fire of aurora. Ahead waited a forest, leafless limbs spidering the sky. As they breached, scent of damp loam filled lungs not his own. A figure stood at clearing's center. Half woman, half shadow, eyes bright as star shards. Arya. She raised an arm in silent greeting. Wolves fanned out around her like fleet guardians. Then dream folded inward. Jon woke at dawn's pale smolder. Back at Winterfell, ravens arrived bearing tidings queer and troubling. Fishermen at White Harbor swore a ring of direwolves watched from the dunes as their boat slipped into harbor, then vanished leaving no prints. A shepherd near Torrhen Square found his littlest ewe dead but untouched otherwise, laying neatly across the doorstep of a burned sept, with wildflowers scattered over her wool. In Barrowton, 3 poachers confessed at the mayor's feet after a gray titan of a wolf stared them down from gravesite mounds throughout the night. Everywhere the pattern repeated. Wolves appearing as harbingers, not harriers. And with them spread talk of the king in the North's mystic pact. Some stories grew extravagant. Whispers that Jon Snow could speak in growls, that his shadow bore wolf ears at dusk. But the tenor shifted from fear to reverence. Small folk left tokens at weirwood faces, carved stones, braids of straw, bowls of marrow fat. An old religion rediscovered a living sacrament. On the 10th dawn, scouts reported a mass of shapes 10 miles south along the King's Road. John rode out with Arya, Davos, and a column of archers, meeting them by a frost-cracked milestone. The shapes proved dire wolves by the score. Nymeria at their head, coat ragged and glorious, amber eyes, cool as fire opals. At her flank walked smaller wolves scarred from countless skirmishes. These bowed their heads when Ghost approached. The two alphas drew nose to nose, no sound save the low howl of wind across moor. Nymeria's eyes flicked to Arya. A tremor crossed Arya's features, a mixture of joy and ancient grief. John dismounted as Arya stepped forward, bladeless, palms out. Nymeria huffed. Arya smiled. "It's good to see you too, girl." No ceremony followed, packs simply merged, individuals sorting themselves with instinctive ease. Davos muttered to John, "7. Save us. Half the North's wolves in one place. What next?" Ghost's ear twitched at the words, but he paid men little mind. Something else claimed him. A scent on the northern wind, salt and rot. John felt it as faint nausea. He turned to Bran's raven perched on Davos' saddle, eyes glassy black. The bird croaked. "East," Davos guessed. John nodded. "East by northeast." He did not know how, but the wolves had felt a disturbance. Not the resurrected dead. Those were ashes now, but a residue maybe. Fire, unnatural, leaking into the snow-cloaked hills near Carhold. Within the hour, the ad hoc war party assembled. 50 spears, a dozen archers, 6 riders, Arya, John, and a winding ribbon of direwolves forming vanguard and flank. They moved at a tireless lope, crossing frozen bogland where reeds rattled like dry bones. The sun sank behind thunderheads. Snow launched itself sideways, yet the wolves forged ahead unbothered. Nymeria darted through drifts like a pale wraith, Ghost a silent engine of muscle beside her. Night fell when they crested a ridge above a mining camp, half buried by drifts. Lanterns swung on poles, chains clinking. A stink rose, pitch, sulfur, and something fouler. Sweet metallic taint John recognized from battlefields where wildfire had spilled. Wolves bristled. John signaled halt, surveyed. Men in black leathers he did not know prowled between tents, loading barrels onto sledges. Their speech carried Southron lilt, not Northern. Davos squinted. Smugglers? Arya's fingers drummed needle's hilt. Or worse. The pack fanned around the ridge's lip, melting into snow. John signaled archers. A scuffle at mid-camp drew his eye. 2 cloaked figures dragging a bound girl toward a sled. She kicked, silent, gagged. One smuggler barked orders, flourishing a torch. He passed close to a snowdrift, and the drift exploded. Ghost burst forth, jaws locking on the man's forearm. Torch flew, sparks hissing. Before screams peaked, other wolves surged, Nymeria on a second man's throat, yellow-eyed sentinel hamstringing a third. Arrows whined, striking barrels that bloomed purple-green flame. The night roared with fire and terror. John charged downhill, men at heels. The melee was brief. Smugglers fled or fell, pinned under fang and steel. One barrel burst, searing a trench in the snow. The wolves avoided contact, miraculously free of flame. Ghost barreled through smoke toward the remaining sleds, scattering guards. John caught the girl. Sliced bonds. She sobbed, but stood. Eyes wide, not with fear of wolves, but awe. "They came from the hills," she stammered. "Took villagers. Forced us to mine." John pressed her to an archer. "Get her warm." He turned back to see Nymeria loping among broken barrels, pausing at one cracked open, to reveal chunks of obsidian, streaked with veins of pale jade. Dragon glass mutated by some furnace unknown. Arya knelt, picked a shard. "This wasn't quarried," she murmured. Something melted it. Davos grimaced at the green flames dying to ash. Wildfire mixed with oils. Gods help us if they've stockpiled enough to shatter the wall again. John stared at the wolves, sniffing shards. They recoiled. Scent repelled them. He felt their collective discomfort. The rock hummed wrong, vibrated with echo of ancient long-night magics. Someone sought to craft weapons beyond mortal ken. John ordered the camp burned clean, survivors taken for questioning. As dawn bled pale over the ravaged site, wolves sat vigil while men searched the last tents. Every so often Ghost's gaze lifted eastward. The message was plain. This attempt had been one finger of a larger claw. Winterfell's great hall swelled with lords and captains summoned by Raven and Rumor alike. Karstark and Glover, Manderley and Serwyn, hardy freefolk chiefs with skin pale or dark or tattooed in blue spirals. They crowded benches, eager for news. John paced before the hearth, Ghost pacing the opposite side like a white-tipped shadow. Beside John stood Arya, Bran, Sansa, and Davos. When hush settled, John spoke. He told of the mine, the obsidian warped by emerald flame, the smuggler's confession of a buyer who sailed under no banner but carried coin minted in foreign mints. He spoke of wolves discovering the danger before steel or spear. Murmurs fluttered through the crowd. Lord Manderley's jowls quivered. "These wolves, our wolves," Arya corrected. Manderley dipped a nod. "Our wolves," he amended, "have saved northern folk already. Should we place sentries with each pack then, to learn of threats sooner?" Bran answered, "Sentries will burden them. Instead, watch the signs, offerings accepted. Tracks around your walls, howls at dusk. They are language if you learn to read." Lady Glover, arms folded, challenged, "And if some Southron prince cries witchcraft? If smells of sorcery keep their envoys away from our ports?" Sansa's smile held a razor edge. "Let them stay south, Lady Glover. The north thrives by its own harvests." John lifted a hand. "Still, we must walk both worlds. Wolves guard by night, men by day. We will station riders at each watchtower, ready to relay any warning Ghost's pack delivers." He turned so all could see Ghost's red gaze. "These warnings may arrive in silence. Fresh-killed stag at your gate, paw prints where none should be. Heed them. Prepare before the storm breaks." A grave hush followed. Then a sound. Claws tapping stone. Nymeria entered, flanked by two smaller wolves. Gasps rippled. She paced to Arya's side and sat, head high. Arya ran a hand through matted fur. The hall watched a stark maiden stroke an alpha predator like a lapdog, and something shifted. Fear transmuted to awe. Lord Serwyn stood. "I would swear my house to the pact of tooth and crown." He knelt. One by one, others followed, until the hall's rushlights glimmered on bent helms and cloaks. John's throat tightened. He raised each with solemn thanks. After the council, while lords feasted on pottage and turnip ale, John withdrew to the battlements. Snow flurried. Hallowing torch flames. Ghost joined, sitting against his leg. Below, wolves patrolled the outer ward. Spectral shapes glimpsed between falling flakes. A warmth bloomed in John's chest. Strange, fierce, unyielding. He understood at last that the North soul was not forged only in iron and ice, but in bloodlines interwoven with fur and snow. A sovereignty older than parchment. He was not just king in the North. He was brother to the wild, sentinel alongside the midnight choir, as the wolves' gathering came to be called in whispered tavern tales. He sensed more yet to unfold. Threats born of twisted obsidian and wildfire alchemy. Southern intrigues that would brand him sorcerer king. But across the dark a song rose, woven of countless howls braiding together in perfect cadence. Nymeria's alto, Ghost's clear tenor, the gloaming bass of old gray titans from Skagus cliffs. It rolled over ramparts, carried through valleys, crashed against the frozen sea. In that hymn, John heard oath and heartbeat woven as one. Whatever storm approached, it would break against a north remade. And at its vanguard would run Ghost, Warg-Leader, commander of every direwolf from shivering sea to the neck. Behind Ghost ran Jon Snow, half man, half moonshadow, his destiny no longer chained to iron thrones, but to the red eyes that burned in the endless dark, guiding him along paths where no kings had dared tread. And somewhere in the far recess where human thought blended with lupine, he felt the heartbeat of the land itself steadying. Each thump echoed by a pawfall, by a breath, by a howl. The pack was whole, and the north, a wounded giant long starved of guardians, opened its great stony eyes and watched through them. K. Agenistral. The moon withdrew behind a drifting veil of cloud as John entered the rookery, its pale light dwindling in the gloom, so only the embers in the brazier threw color upon the stones. Ravens muttered in their wicker roosts, wings rustling like parchment in a turning page. Maester Walken stood on a stool, coaxing an old raven onto a gloved hand, his breath a wan plume in the cold. When he saw John, he bowed his gray head. "I've prepared the birds, your grace. One for Old Town, one for White Harbor, and one for King's Landing, should you still wish to send to the Southrons." "Bah." John tugged his cloak closer. "I do. But change the wording, Maester. We share news, not ask permission. Let the Citadel know of these molten shards. They may have lore on obsidian turned to glassfire. Tell White Harbor to seal the harbor against vessels flying unknown banners, and to King's Landing." He hesitated. "Offer courtesy to Queen Alice in return for vigilance. Gold routes run both ways. She'll want to know someone is buying smuggled or this far north." Walken's quill scratched, ink pooling in tiny midnight lakes as he added the addenda. A raven cawed loud as iron striking stone. In the candle flicker, John glimpsed its eyes, black and old and bright, without a hint of fear for the direwolves prowling now beneath these ramparts. It struck him with sudden certainty that the birds knew more than men about this new kingdom's pulse. Their hoarse songs nightly told secrets to Bran, and Bran in turn whispered them to the heart trees that whispered back through root and snow to every silent paw. Paper trimmed, seals warmed, John pressed his signet ring into red wax, a direwolf rampant on rough-hewn shield. The mark felt heavier than it looked. Dawn cracked brittle and blue, the sun a drowsy ember on the rim of a world crusted with hoarfrost. The column bound for the rills assembled in the eastern courtyard. 30 riders, half as many supply wagons, and a rear guard of free folk archers under Tormund Giantsbane, who arrived, wrapped in a bearskin so vast it trailed behind him like a shaggy cloak. He stamped a boot the size of a roast and roared for hot wine, then laughed when Ghost stalked from the kennels and chuffed a breath that misted Tormund's beard white. "There's the true king on the north," Tormund declared, scratching Ghost's head with calloused fingers. "Will you let me ride your snow pup into battle, eh?" A sight to make Southrun knees knock. "Let's." Ghost tolerated the attention, though a faint rumble in his chest warned boundaries still existed. John swung into the saddle of his Garen. Arya rode beside him, astride a smoky mare she'd named Hollow. Behind them, Nymeria trotted at ease, her retinue of Riverland wolves drawn lean and scarred from seasons of quiet war. No banners flapped, only the hush of heavy breath and stamping hooves, punctuated by the distant crow of a rooster who mistook the gray sky for sunrise. They took the long road skirting the western branch of the White Knife. Ice sheeted the river, yet fissures glinted where current gnawed beneath. Men marched single file across Dreadfort fields, where scorched earth still told the tale of Ramsay Bolton's last folly. Ravens perched on blackened fence posts, unafraid of the wolves. John watched Ghost move ahead, tail a pale pennon in the snow. Now and then Ghost paused to sniff a broken wall or a patch of churned mud, then continued, leaving marks invisible to human eyes but lighting bright as runes inside Joan's shared perception. Mid-morning, Bran's raven caught them, circling thrice before landing on Joan's saddle horn. A scrap of vellum tied to its leg bore 2 words in Bran's controlled hand. "Salt Spear." John frowned. Beside him, Arya tilted her head. "House Stone Tree's old fortress," she guessed. John nodded. Salt Spear Keep jutted from a sea cliff far to the northwest, ruined since the Greyjoy Rebellion. Bran must have tasted something in the river of time and dream. He seldom wrote without gravity. John slipped the note into his glove and told Tormund to angle their march west at dusk. They crossed into the Barrowlands, under sky streaked pink like bruised flesh. Frost-crusted standing stones hunched over the hills, marker graves of ancient kings, whose names lingered only in the runes. Bran now read as easily as summer children read Septon fables. On a solitary cairn sat yellow-eyed sentinel. John had begun naming the wolves to fix them in mind. Wisp, for the swirl of cream at her throat. She lifted a paw, as if beckoning. Ghost trotted to meet her. John saw through her eyes for an instant. A ripple of grass flattened by wind. A pile of broken stones parted to reveal a dark hole. John urged his horse closer. Beneath the cairn yawned a tunnel lined in mortared slate. The air spilling out carried old rot and something sharper, the caustic tang of wildfire. He swung down, lantern in hand, and ducked inside. The shaft was narrow, carved brutally through earth, leading to a chamber, maybe 20 paces deep. At its center stood wooden racks stacked with crates, half smashed. Dregs of green alchemical jelly clung to splintered slats. Nearby lay a pile of obsidian lumps, some raw, some partially melted into slick ebony glass. Atop them perched a brass contraption shaped like an urn with spidery arms, a crucible designed to hold fire hotter than smithy coals. John prowled the perimeter, boots crunching salt crystals that sparkled on the floor. He knelt at a smear of rust brown flecked with feathers, blood weeks old. Tormund joined, sniffed the air, and spat. Stinks like magic piss. A clicking rasp echoed, rats scurrying. Yet when John lifted the lantern, he saw not rodents, but scorched raven bones, neatly arranged in a circle around the crucible. A ritual. He recalled Melisandre's flames licking about her ruby, a priestess's fire, bright and terrifying. This cavern felt like its darker echo. No prayers, only hunger. Arya crouched by an open crate that held only straw dust. She frowned. They've moved most of it south, or east. She glanced at the walls, fingers trailing a faint chalk scrawl she read aloud under her breath. Ashes birth the starless dawn. A chill knotted John's spine. They left the chamber sealed behind a fall of stones, though John doubted such moral barriers mattered to those who trafficked with green flame. Yet Bran's warning had borne fruit. They knew now that caches dotted the land. How many had gone unnoticed? He pictured wolves combing cairns under midnight stars, howling whenever they found hollow ground. Salt Spear Keep revealed itself 2 days later, a broken crown of masonry clinging to a cliff where the shivering sea battered stone with deafening force. Gulls screamed overhead, their cries snatched by the wind. The outer wall had long ago collapsed into rubble, yet John felt the prickle of eyes watching from every fissure. Ghost's hackles lifted. He bounded ahead, nose to the breeze, and Nymeria followed, tail whisking snow off dandelion stalks that somehow clung to the frozen earth. John signaled dismount. The men fanned into arrow formations, shields raised against any surprise. Tormund hefted an axe as wide as a child and chuckled. Castles already taken by ghosts owe its own. He eyed Ghost. No offense. Inside the courtyard lay remnants of pyres. Scorched timbers, bones of goats piled high, burnt offerings. Wolves circled but did not approach the ash. John knelt and sifted the black flakes. Charred feathers mingled with straw dolls. Crude figures of men and direwolves bound together by hemp. A heavy scent of pine resin lingered. Someone had tried to sanctify this place to a purpose. Or defile it. The door to the keep's tower hung ajar. Arya slipped through first. John followed into a narrow spiral stair that corkscrewed down instead of up, tunneling beneath the sea-facing cliff. Far below, the crash of surf pounded like war drums. Lantern light quivered on damp walls until the stair vomited them into a cavern, glistening with salt spray. Sea-smoothed boulders ringed an iron cage large as a horse stall. Within crouched a man clothed in rags stiff with brine. Shackles bit his ankles, his wrists manacled behind the back. He raised a gaunt face creased with soot. Whiskers sprouted like bleak winter grass. His lips cracked as he spoke. "Mercy by all gods, kill me or free me." His accent carried the razor edge of Braivos. John stepped closer, sword lowered but ready. "Who chained you?" The prisoner blinked. blood-matted hair falling across a sunken eye. "Sons of the stranger," he croaked. "Silver masks. They brand us, tongues of ash. Used us to mine the black crystal, feed the green fire." He coughed, hacking seawater. Arya fetched a water skin and tipped cool liquid past his ruined lips. He drank greedily, then whispered, "They sail east at moonrise. Galleys black as pitch. Cargo holds brim with flame." Jon glanced at Arya, who nodded and slipped back up the stairway, silent as a spider. Out in the courtyard, horns sounded, 3 mournful notes. Tormund's voice boomed. "Ships on the horizon." Jon freed the prisoner's shackles with needle, the tiny blade biting the rusted lock. Ghost nudged the man upright. Despite terror, he did not flinch at the wolf's proximity. Jon strapped a cloak about the wiry shoulders. "What is your name?" he asked. "Risano," the man whispered. "Off the Iron Bank." Jon's brow rose. "Then you will live to carry warning, Risano. Can you wield oar or blade?" "I can keep accounts," Risano said with a mirthless smile. "And I owe you a great one." They emerged into blinding daylight. The sea boiled below, whitecaps clawing at the rocks where 3 sleek galleys cut through foam. Sails reefed, oars churning. Their hulls shimmered pitch black, prows carved into serpent heads. From each masthead flew a banner of silver cloth bearing a single symbol, an eclipse ringed by stylized flames. Jon felt Ghost's loathing ripple across their bond. No time for siege engines. Jon hauled Tormund aside. "We need those hulls turned to driftwood. Wolves can't swim that far." Tormund grinned and hefted a clay jar of wildfire, scavenged from the cairn. Green Demon's breath lights water just as well as wood. Jon sized his wrist. "Not on the cliffs? Sea wind'll blow flame back upon us." Arya appeared at his shoulder. "I can board them," she said. Needle flashed. "Take out the helms, jam the rudders." Tormund bellowed laughter. "Little wolf, you'd be skewered afore you set foot on deck." Jon met Arya's eyes, cool gray steel. He remembered her dancing between whites like water itself. "You're not going alone." He scanned the courtyard. A narrow goat path zigzagged the cliff, descending to tidal pools. "We'll row out in the skiff. Cut them off as they round the headland." Tormund whistled for 6 of his wildlings, men fierce as snow lions. They shouldered rope coils and crude firebombs, pitch flasks wrapped in oiled cloth. As the column prepared, the wolves gathered at the cliff edge, wine-dark sea reflecting in their eyes like molten glass. Ghost's snarl vibrated in Jon's chest. The pack wanted to leap, swim, bite wood until it bled. But they understood distance. They stood sentinel. The skiff, once used by reavers, slid into surf that hissed like a caged dragon under the cliff's shadow. Jon, Arya, Tormund, and 4 oarsmen fought eddies that sucked them toward hidden rocks. Sea spray slapped faces raw dodging. Over the crash, Arya shouted, "If we sink, swim for the weed line. It curls around a cave mouth, dry inside." Her certainty was unnerving. She knew these waters better than her own dreams, having roamed the coast in childhood chasing seals. The first galley loomed, black ribs rising, oars beating time like a giant's heart. Figures in silver half-masks paced the deck. 7 on the starboard side, crossbows ready. One shouted, pointing. Bolts hissed into the waves around the skiff. Jon ducked, handed tiller to an oarsman, then drew long claw. "Angle leeward," he yelled. The skiff looped behind the galley's stern. Arya sprang, a shadow against dark wood, catching the rudder chain, swinging up onto the rail. She vanished among crates, stacked too high. Tormund hurled a pitch flask through the stern window. It shattered. A roar followed and green fire whooshed from the gallery cabin, curling outward like a serpent, searing rigging. Rowers shrieked inside their benches. Smoke belched in oily coils. The helmsman spun, mask glinting. Jon's sword tip caught him beneath the chin, steel sliding into throat. Blood met snow-laced spray and pink ribbons. Jon hauled the corpse overboard to clear the tiller. On deck, Arya leapt onto a crate and plunged needle between helm spokes, snapping the haft across, jamming the rudder. A masked warrior advanced. She darted under his cutlass, hamstringed him in one fluid slash, then kicked him into the flaming cabin. Heat blasted, blistering the wooden deck. John clambered aboard as arrows zipped past. Two struck his pauldron, thunking harmlessly off mail. He cut an archer across the back, then pivoted to parry a spear thrust. Tormund bellowed a battle hymn, axe scything. Chaos reigned. The galley listed where wildfire ate her guts. John seized Arya's arm. Abandoned ship. They dove together off the port side, water swallowing them in shocking cold. When they surfaced, the burning hull bore down, drifting broadside as oars flailed. They kicked hard to avoid suction. Behind, the second galley veered, trying to cut them down, only to collide with the first. Cries and cracking timbers filled the air. From the cliffs above came a wave of echoing howls, so piercing it seemed the sky itself might fracture. John treaded water, ears pounding. Wolves lined the precipice like ghosts carved of hoarfrost, their eyes mirrors for the conflagration below. It felt as though they pulled strength from the sea wind and hurled it down upon their enemies. On the tilted deck of the second galley, silver-masked sailors wavered, heads snapping upward. Terror claimed them before steel or fire. Tormund's skiff bobbed near the wreck, its prow splintered but afloat. He hauled John and Arya aboard. Two wildlings rowed with panicked fury, flinging salted foam astern. The galley's entangled hull scraped rock, masts folding. A single charred sail collapsed in glowing tatters. When wildfire kissed water, green flames danced across the waves, lighting the underside of the clouds in sickly jade. From the far side of the wreck emerged the third galley, sails slack, oars drawn. Perhaps its captain sensed doom. Yet where he turned, wolves awaited. Line after line, silhouettes ringing cliff and headland. It was a tableau out of legend, beasts commanding heights, men at sea cornered like rats. The galley turned seaward, but a rogue current drove her closer to submerged rocks. Her keel struck, the crack shot across water. Oars froze mid-stroke. Sailors screamed as hull planks splintered. When wildfire barrels rolled amidships, waves doused their fuses. No explosion came. Instead, a smoking trail of resin drifted aft, and with a hiss caught spark upon iron lantern, blossoming into green. The crew leapt overboard into black water already swirling with burning oil. One by one, their silver masks sank beneath sodium glare. John and his companions made shore at a cove flanked by kelp-slick stones. Tormund dragged the skiff above tide line, then flopped onto the sand, chest heaving. Arya wrung seawater from her braids. John stared out where flames still licked shattered masts. He felt Ghost's presence approach before pads crunched pebble. The direwolf nosed Joan's shoulder, warm breath ghosting across his neck. Nymeria padded to Arya, leaning weight into her knee. Both siblings reached to bury fingers in the coarse fur. Communion pulsed, a silent circle closing. Rhysano had watched the battle from the cliff, bound arm in sling now. He descended with Bran's raven perched upon his uninjured shoulder. "The sea owes you a debt," he called above surf roar. "And the Iron Bank pays its debts." John lifted a brow. "When the smoke clears, I'll allow you to tally damages." Rhysano nodded gravely, but Bran's raven ruffled feathers, croaking thrice. John frowned, and took the scrap of vellum strapped anew to slim leg. One word, Dorn Tiwai. Joan's chest tightened. Far to the south heat shimmered and desert winds carried secrets of spears and sand snakes. But what threat could bloom there now? He folded the note. "We head back," he said to the others. "The river of danger forks in many currents." The march home took half the time of their outbound journey. The wolves chose paths untouched by cart or horse. They ran beneath sunless sky, fleet and sure, and men followed as best they could, guided by shaken faith. At each night's camp, Ghost selected high ground, while Nymeria patrolled perimeter. Fires burned low, conversation quieter still. Those who had stood on the cliff swore they felt something pass through them when the wolves howled, an inheritance of courage not their own. On the fourth night, as they neared Moat Cailin, Bran's raven arrived yet again, but this time no message dangled. Instead, it cawed into darkness and flew in widening circles until John, drawn by restless instinct, walked alone to the edge of camp. Their ghost awaited, nose lifted. John sank to his knees, grounding palms on cold soil. He closed his eyes. The barrier between mind and beast dissolved into a wind-swept plain where snowflakes swirled upward like embers. In that liminal space, Bran stood. No chair taller than in flesh, draped in a cloak of black feathers, eyes silver within silver. "You saw the serpents drown," Bran's voice pulsed, more thought than sound. "Yet their head still coils. South under sun, forging blades of lies." John whispered, "The bankman? The coins? They pay for war," Bran replied, "but not their own. A hidden prince dreams of dawnless day, candle lit by wildfire green." Your road bends toward him. John felt pull of sand beneath his boots, tasted salt not of sea but of sweat under blistering sun. Dornish wind moaned, hot and dry. He glimpsed spires shaped like spears pointing skyward, all glass and bronze wrought anew, nothing like Sunspear of old tales. And in its shadow, a shipyard berthing hulls black as sin. Bran's visage flickered, replaced by a weirwood face cracking, sap running crimson. "Winter fell on our land and passed," Bran whispered. "But winter sleeps now in men's hearts, waiting command. Ghost must lead the silent host south. Yet men must go too. Stark of wolf, snow of ash, undying night turned living dawn." The words coiled like riddles, yet John felt meaning swirl. "Will you guide me?" he asked Bran. But the winds roared, and both brother and raven vanished. John woke kneeling in frost. Ghost stared at him, eyes lit by starshine. He understood. The wolves would range ahead, unseen, tracing supply lines, disrupting hidden labs, scattering spies. Meanwhile, he must walk two worlds, throne rooms and battlefields, and carry the pack south before serpents wove new venom. Winterfell greeted his return with banners whipping and bells clanging from the broken tower. Sansa met him at the gate in a cloak of pale fox, her smile thin with strain. "Letters have come," she said, pressing them into his hand. White Harbor pledged fleets to guard the Bight. Old Town reported cabal of rogue alchemists missing from the Guild of Wisdom. King's Landing begged audience. Queen Alice offered alliance if Jon would quell these wolves of shadow raiding her lumber caravans near Maidenpool. A lie yet revealing rumors spread. And from Dorne wrote a sand-scribed parchment, sealed with wax depicting twin scimitars beneath a haloed eclipse, the same sigil on the black galleys. Jon absorbed this standing before the heart tree where Bran waited. Snow dusted Bran's hair like ash. "The prince in the south calls himself the Ashen Sun," Bran said without preamble. "He buys alchemy, obsidian, and powders older than Valyria. His dream is a world lit not by day and night but by ceaseless glow, where he alone decides dawn." Sansa shivered. "Madness." Bran's mouth curved faintly. "Vision, if unopposed, can remake the earth. But Ghost has stirred a counter-dream." "Nay." Jon looked up into crimson leaves fluttering. "Then we ride south, with wolves for outriders and men for echo." Sansa laid a hand on his arm. "Take care with banners. The Reach remembers wars of wolf and lion. Let the lords see a Stark courier first, not a conqueror." Jon nodded. "We'll need envoys. Davos to Storm's End, Lord Manderley to Old Town, and Arya." But his sister stepped from a shadow, already saddle-packed. "I leave tonight," she said. "Through the neck, unseen. Nymeria goes with me. We'll scout the Sandship coast." "Now never mind, Seal." In the yard, torches flared, illumining a sight that stilled every tongue. Ghost pacing among the assembled direwolves, nuzzling each muzzle in farewell. Some would remain north to guard holdfasts. Others would slip through forest and fen, shadows rolling ahead of their human comrades. Jon watched, tears stinging unbidden. Pride and sorrow. Ghost halted before him, pressed his forehead to Jon's chest. The bond thrummed like a plucked harp string. Then the white wolf turned and loped into the godswood, pack surging after in cascading silence. A river of fur vanishing beneath red canopies. Only distant howls lingered, vows to unseen stars. That night, the castle felt cavernous in their absence. Yet as John lay sleepless, he realized the hush was not empty. It rang, a new language inscribed upon each stone. Echo of the midnight choir woven into Winterfell's marrow. The North would never again be merely land. It was living host, mind distributed across countless paws and beating hearts. And he, its chosen voice. Dawn came bleeding rose gold through arrow slits. John rose, donned brigandine and snow-washed cloak, and descended to the gate where his retinue already formed ranks. Tormund with wildlings singing crude ballads, Lady Lyanna Mormont astride a shaggy, bare-colored Garen, Davos shouldering scroll satchels. Bran watched from a balcony, gray eyes alight with omens, Sansa beside him whispering final counsel. Jon mounted his horse and raised a horn. Its note boomed over the battlements. The portcullis groaned up. Beyond lay the King's Road strewn with poplar leaves shining silver under hoarfrost. Jon looked once more to the godswood. No wolves appeared, but in the hollows of air between snowflakes, he sensed their presence, patient as moonlight. He spurred his horse. The column clattered out, banners unfurled. Stark Direwolf, Mormont Bear, Umber Giant, and newly sown, a standard blank save for a single crimson eye set in a field of gray, the sigil of the pact. They rode south toward the heart of sand and sun, where wildfire dreams threatened to bloom. And behind them, wind whispered through Winterfell's towers, a promise and a warning both. That stone would stand while blood remembered, that tooth and claw would answer when horns of war blew again, and that wherever the pack ran, the night itself would keep watch, Warg-led, unbroken, fearless. The road stretched endlessly, but time felt deep and supple, its measure kept by pulses in hidden forests, and by the steady course of a white wolf guiding destiny beyond the edge of history. Ponun Anhi. The King's Road uncoiled before them like a dark river frozen in mid-rush. Its rutted length rhymed white beneath a pewter sky. Hoofbeats drummed in muffled cadence, rising and falling with the swing of riders' cloaks, every breath a pale plume drifting back into the endless procession. Jon kept a steady pace at the column's head. Snowwolf cloak fanned across his shoulders, Longclaw riding silent at his hip. The wind carried scents of pine pitch, distant hearth smoke, and the raw iron tang of a world still healing from war. Yet beneath it all coursed another current, sensed more in bone than flesh, the pulse of dire wolves fanning beyond the tree line, unseen yet near, guiding each mile. On the second noon they crossed the barrows where first men kings slept. Mists clung to the hollow eyes of moss-crowned cairns, and ghost light seeped between leaning stones. Jon called a brief halt so the men might water their mounts. As they rested, Tormund trudged up to Jon's stirrup, beard bristling with icicles, gaze sweeping the silent fields. "Feels like walking atop a graveyard," the wildling growled. "It is," Jon answered, "but we're still welcome." He listened. A hush, yes, but no sense of warning from Ghost's far-flung mind. The wolves respected these ruins. The dead beneath did not stir. They rode again before shadows lengthened, and by dusk thin snow began to fall, swirling like ashes on a slow wind. Fires sprang up in a hastily fortified camp nestled between twin barrows, orange bloom against the gloom. Ring fort walls of wagons formed a crude palisade, spears jutting above like thistle spines. The cookpots hung and bubbled. The scent of hare stew rolled out in heartening waves. Jon made his rounds, pausing beside Lady Lyanna Mormont where she stood dwarfed by the shaggy garon she brushed down, her brow furrowed beneath a cap of raven-black curls. "Are the wolves truly out there now?" she asked without preface. "They watch." Jon laid a gloved hand on the pony's steaming flank. "You'll hear them if danger draws close." Lyanna's mouth quirked. "Then may they howl often. I did not come south to sip Dornish wine." "Yemen, you'll see plenty of trouble before we're done," Jon promised grimly. Night deepened, feathered with drifting flakes. John sat atop an overturned crate near the central fire, grinding stale bark into kindling when a rustle signaled Bran's raven dropping from the gloom. It perched upon the crate's rim, head tilting, eyes twin beads of onyx. John extended an arm. The bird hopped to his wrist. In its claws lay a scrap of linen knotted with a single black thread. Message enough. Bran's absence of words meant only one thing. See beyond eyes, brother. John closed his own and let the raven's pupils widen around him like bottomless wells. He was air, then snow, then wing beats. Below, the camp lay ringed in amber fires. Farther out, the wolf's teeth forest rippled under moonlight, canopies sagging with white burden. Movement among the trunks drew him, sleek shadows coursing between pines, ghost at their head, Nymeria elsewhere, threading the marshy fingers of shady glen. Orris of scents rose. Fox, frost moss, and the musk of men who stalked with blades unsheathed. Joan's borrowed gaze swept left. There, a shard of iron glint. A helm rim just beyond torch reach, figure crouched low. Another to the right. 5, 10, 30 men in piecemeal mail silently fanning toward the wagons, shields painted with the eclipse sigil. The ashen sun had found them. Wind shifted. The nearest wolf snarled. The attackers froze, crossbows half raised. A silence of one heartbeat. 2. And ghost erupted from the darkness, eyes blazing ruby, fangs shearing through the first man's throat. Chaos followed. Shadow wolves burst beside him, silent as nightmares, tearing, slamming, scattering. One bandit loosed a quarrel that hissed past the raven's borrowed sight. Another tried to flee, only to vanish under a streak of tawny fur and snapping jaws. John tore back into his own skin. He slammed gauntlets together. "To arms!" he roared, surging upright. Across the camp, steel rang, men stumbling from bedrolls. But by the time they spilled beyond the wagons, torches aloft, only wind and settling snow greeted them. Black-clad corpses lay in a ring, throats opened, chests riven. Ghosts padded into the lantern glow, muzzle crimson. Tormund whistled. "Well, giant's piss didn't even wake me." He knelt by a corpse, ripping free a mask of hammered silver, etched with the eclipse. Lyanna studied the strange helm thoughtfully. "They follow some god of night?" "No god," John said, kneeling to inspect. "A prince, Bran thinks. Ashen Sun, he calls himself." He lifted a leather satchel from a dead man's belt. Inside lay a glass vial swirling with emerald oil. Wildfire primer. Another pouch rattled with obsidian dust, the color of dried blood. "We move at dawn," John decided. "Double watch till then. Wolves will take the outer ring." As the bodies burned, green flame licking the pyre edges with sullen light, John stood apart, feeling Ghost's presence pressing gentle reassurance against his thoughts. The pack's silent vow lingered in the air. We are the dark that guards the dark. No arrow nor blade would touch the kings so long as they prowled. 2 more days south, the land softened. Snow receded to ragged patches beneath shag carpets of brown heather. Streams ran swift and clear, murmuring of spring though winter clung to branch tips. They crossed the last river on a stone bridge built by Andals long dead. Hooves striking echoes into the deep gorge. On the far bank, a child of maybe 8 stood wrapped in a threadbare cloak, cheeks smudged by soot. In his arms wriggled a lamb too thin for its fleece. The boy stared wide-eyed at the column, then dropped to one knee as Ghost trotted past. The lamb bleated once but did not struggle. John reined it in. "Stand, lad." The boy rose trembling. "And Ma says the white wolf guards us now. She told me give him our only runt, else wolves might take the fat ones later." "Namen?" Ghost huffed, sniffing the lamb, then nudged it gently back to the boy. John smiled. "Keep your lamb. Ghost will hunt for himself." He fished a silver stag from his purse. "For your mother, buy salt and oats in Barrowton." The child took the coin like holy relic, eyes brimming. As the column filed past, word spread in hushed tones. The king's wolves take no tithe of innocence, only of those who ride in shadow-clad masks of silver. They reached the neck beneath a bruised sunset. reed flats stretching endless, water-glimmering bronze between tussocks. The causeway road wound narrow, treacherous with sinkholes and hidden bogs. Reeds rattled like bone chimes. John ordered scouts ahead. Men of the Cranogs under Hallis Reed, lithe figures who seemed to rise from the very water. The wolves hesitated at first, disliking the sucking mud. But Wisp plunged forward, and the rest followed, their weight light enough to crest hummocks others avoided. One evening, while cook fires crackled on a rare dry island, Lord Hallis knelt before John, offering a spear tip carved from jet black stone. "Dragon glass shaped by our singers," he explained. Weathered face unreadable in the firelight. "The ashen sun bleeds the same night fire we fought in ancient days. This will drink its poison and stay unshattered." John accepted with gratitude, fixing the spearhead to a walnut haft, stripped of bark. Ghost sniffed the glass tip and sneezed, lips curling. He disliked the tang of forging songs that had birthed it, yet acknowledged its necessity. 2 nights later, ghosts of a different sort arrived. Arya slipped from the shadows, dusty and travel-stained, Nymeria padding at her side. John greeted them with fierce embrace, relief washing through him at the confirmation of their safety. "I rode with traders to Maidenpool," she whispered that night over a guttering candle, "and listened at every tavern. The ashen sun buys casks of wildfire in secret, ferries them by river to Duskendale, then south by road over Blackwater Rush. He has agents across the Stormlands, paying double weight in silver for known smugglers." John frowned. "Does Alice Karstark know?" "She suspects, but lacks proof. The crown is wounded, gold shortages after the last war. They close eyes to any coin flowing through the ports." John exhaled. "Then we must provide proof. And cut the route. The wolves already harry their wagons." Asked Ghost. John reached, felt along the bond. Flashes of torches tipping into black water. Wolves scattering mules, barrels toppling in bogs where no man dared chase. But too many caravans still slipped through nets. They would need men as blades to complement fang and claw. Once beyond the neck, the air warmed enough to carry scent of wet leaves and promise of flowering dogwood. They turned southeast, skirting the ruins of Harrenhal, its melted towers glowering across a shattered lake. Ghost would not set paw inside. He circled wide, hackles high, as though even Direwolf sensed the lingering scream of dragonfire echoing in every scorched stone. South of the Trident, riders met them bearing sigils of River Run, the silver trout on red and blue. Edmure Tully himself came, newborn son swaddled astride his chest. "I'll shelter refugees fleeing these shadow thieves," Edmure swore. "But my levies are lean, grain stores still low after the last winter." "You'll not stand alone," John assured him. "Manderley sends ships up the Trident with flour and salt. And the wolves guard your fords now." Edmure glanced toward the darkening woods where green eyes glimmered. Awe warred with unease. "May they never hunger then," he murmured. Beyond River Run the King's Road ran broader, pitted by old siege pits and patched by new gravel. Villages dotted the verges, many houses bearing carved wolf heads above lintels, the small folks' way of pledging loyalty. At a crossroads inn, Joan's party encountered a tinker's wagon overturned. Axle snapped. 2 children sobbed beside a tilting cage, holding trapped songbirds, while their fathers struggled to free a mule buried in mud. Wolves ringed the scene, but not menacing. They kept other scavengers at bay. When Joan's soldiers lifted the wagon upright, the tinker wept thanks and pressed a rough garland of winter roses into Joan's hands. That night the vine was hung above the king's tent flap. White petals, luminous in starlight, symbol of the realm's fragile gratitude. At last Storm's End's massive drum tower rose upon the horizon, its cragged silhouettes etched by lightning. Black clouds seethed overhead, a gale whipped banners horizontal. Davos parted company, spurring ahead with 2 riders to treat with Gendry Baratheon, still newly raised Lord of Storm's End. John watched them vanish down the rain-slick slope, recalling how once he'd ridden with Davos beneath a sky filled with blue fire and whites uncountable. Trust lay deep as bedrock between them. Davos would broker safe harbor for survivors should war spill north again. John's own road, bent west toward the Rosuad, and the reach beyond, where Lord Manderley now awaited word from Old Town's archmasters. But time pressed. The ashen sun grew bold. Reports of masked riders raiding market trains outside Bitterbridge. More caches discovered, some empty save for raven feathers charred to drifting soot. One twilight, as campfires winked alive under vine-draped oaks, a lone rider approached, banner limp, a red sun transfixed by black rays. He halted beyond arrow reach and lifted his mask, sculpted obsidian so thin the setting sun shone through. "I come on under parley," he called. His voice was soft, accented from the far east. John rode out flanked by Tormund and Lyanna. Ghost paced, silent. The emissary unrolled the parchment, words penned in soot ink flowing like smoke trails. "The Prince of the Ashen Sun invites the king who knelt to witness the dawn that knows no night. Bring sword, crown, or nothing. The outcome is the same. Flame accepts all." John met the man's eyes, pale amber, pupil narrow as a cat's. "Tell your prince the North rides south for peace, but will grant him mercy upon surrender." The emissary smiled, showing teeth filed to narrow points. "Mercy is a luxury mortals forfeit when they cage the sun. He will burn your mercy, and from the ashes forge eternity." Tormund spat. "Tell him we'll shove eternity up his arse." The emissary replaced his mask, bowed, and wheeled away into dusky gloom, vanishing among trees without sound, as though swallowed by the fast-falling night. John exhaled slowly. Ghost pressed close, body rigid. "They scout our numbers," Lyanna said grimly. "More will come." "Let them," John answered. But a hollow tug gnawed at him. Bran's words returned. "Winter sleeps now in men's hearts, waiting command." The ashen sun commanded such winter. Beyond Bitterbridge, the land sloped toward broad plains patchworked by fields of barley and winter rape. Farmers greeted them from hedgerows, though fewer wolves prowled here. Thide fanned east and west, harassing supply caravans bound for Dorne's secret foundries. Yet John still felt them, distant but near, a chorus at the edge of hearing. One evening, as moonlight spilled silver upon dewy grass, Ghost's presence flared alarm. John lay half dreaming and bolted upright, heart hammering. He rushed outside the pavilion. The camp snored quiet. But beyond, he sensed movement. A ripple of hoofbeats across the plain. He grabbed a horn, sounded 2 sharp notes. Men scrambled, cinching belts, seizing spears. Through the dim light of dying embers, shapes thundered. Horses armored in black lacquer, riders masked, torches guttering green flame. They spurred straight for the encampment perimeter. John swung onto his stallion bareback, shouting orders. Archers loosed volleys. Some shafts struck, but many shattered against hidden plates of reinforced iron. The masked horsemen hurled clay globes that burst on impact. Plumes of emerald fire licking canvas, tents igniting. Panic rippled. Horses squealed, stamping. Then wolves arrived, sweeping in from both flanks like starlit surf. Ghost led the western bank, Nymeria the east. They leapt at horses' throats, dragging beasts to earth in tangles of kicking hooves. Flames spilled, but wolves ducked aside, rolling through dewy grass that smothered sparks. John spurred into the melee, long claw flashing, cleaving a rider's spine. Tormund bellowed beside him, axe biting through helm and skull. The skirmish ended in minutes. A dozen riders slain, 5 captured, campfires extinguished. No soldier of Jon's host fell, though several bore scorched coats. One prisoner raved in a language none knew, froth flecking his lips. The other 4 remained silent even under threat. Ghost paced before them, nose wrinkling, scent of poppy and black leaves on their breath. John recognized fatal loyalty. They would die before yielding. At dawn the raving man expired, veins spidered with dark veins of poison. The others were bound, muzzles fixed to foil suicide. John dispatched them to Storm's End. Gendry's dungeons had cells built beneath tidal caves, impossible to breach. But in his heart, John feared such zealots no prison could hold for long. 2 mornings later, Columns of dust marked the Roserad where Allied forces joined. Bitterbridge levies in rose-pink cloaks, Tarley spearmen in forest green, and a thin host from Old Town, bearing the livery of an open book clasped by a key. House Hightower at last moved against the hidden threat. Lord Hightower himself rode at their fore, gaunt and white-bearded, yet eyes keen as frost. He clasped Joan's arm. "The Citadel sends word." We scoured old scrolls. This ashen sun cult arose 2 centuries after the doom, in the shadow of Cahorus Forest. They worship no god, only the promise of unending day forged by dragonfire mixed with wildfire and obsidian. They failed then, but now they have found new formula. He lowered his voice. Archmaesters believe they seek to ignite the sky. Dust sooty with glass fire that could blot out stars, reflecting flame eternal. John felt his stomach turn cold. And they build this in Dorne. Among red dunes, yes. A caldera, dead volcano, serves as crucible. They call it Solstice Pit. A hush fell as the imports settled. Eternal fire, death of night. Perhaps death of growing things, of seasons, of life itself. John gazed south. Horizons blurred by heat haze, though cold lingered on the breeze. Then we ride for the pit. March slowed as they entered Dornish marches, hills naked save for knotgrass and weathered granite tors. Water scarce, dust-coated throats. Wolves struggled under noon blaze, tongues lolling. John ordered progression begin at dusk, and travel through night when air cooled. Tents pitched under waning moon. Men rested by day in rocky gullies. Nets stretched for shade. One such afternoon, Arya returned from scouting with Nymeria Eildot, her face streaked with ochre dust. "Found something," she said, voice hushed. "You need to see." They rode a short distance, to a narrow ravine where sandstone walls towered like rusted blades. At its end gaped a cave mouth ringed by scorched pebbles. Within, dim light showed stacks of iron cages. Skeletons crouched inside, hundreds, bones fused to bars by melted slag. John swallowed bile. Brands marked their rib cages. An orb of black sun pierced by nails of flame. Arya fingered a rusted lock. They burned them alive, testing the glass fire. Nymeria whined, tail low. John closed eyes, sensing wolves outside circling restlessly. Fury rose, hot as the sun above. "We cannot leave this unavenged." That evening he gathered his captains, Lady Lyanna, Tormund, Hallis Reed, Lord Hightower, and a grizzled Stormlander named Ser Quentin Buckler, whose men specialized in siege ladders. "We strike Solstice Pit by 3 gates. John laid a rough map upon camp table. Smooth tide, charcoal marks, north slope cliffs, narrow but wolves can scale, and hairy archers. East slope holds main ramp, carved into volcanic glass. Our shield wall takes that path. Lord Hallis guides swamp-born through tunnels rumored to vent steam on western face. May lead behind their forge. Now," he raised the jet-black spear. "Their masks protect from poison fumes. Ours will not. We strike quick, break the crucible, spill the fire before they spark sky." Tormund grinned. "And piss on their ashes," Hightower added. "Citadel ravens carry a draft, an alchemical salt that quenches wildfire on contact. We bring barrels, but once uncorked they turn caustic. Handle with care." One. Plans set. Forces split. Wolves dispersed, seeking vantage in the labyrinth of sandstone fins. Overhead, sky burned violet, sun a red coin sliding behind Buta. John found quiet at the edge of camp, where sparse grass whispered. Ghost lay waiting. John knelt, bowing forehead to snowy fur. "Tomorrow," he murmured. Across the bond pulsed raw determination. Ghost touched his nose to Joan's chest, then melted into the dark, a pale arrow streaking toward the silhouette of distant ridges. They approached Solstice Pit, under a milk-white dawn, wind scouring the basin with sand that hissed against shields. From a ridge John looked down, an amphitheater of black glass sunk into cracked earth. tiers of scaffolds arrayed around a central vent spewing sluggish smoke. Wooden trebuchets pointed skyward, their payloads glimmering green in clay jars. Hundreds of masked acolytes bustled about, tending bronze pipes gurgling with toxic brew. Atop a dais stood a figure draped in scarlet robes woven with slivers of obsidian thread. Face bare, hair white blonde, skin burnished gold by sun. His eyes shone honey pale. A smile curved lips as if greeting old friends across the miles. The ashen sun. Trumpets blared, notes discordant, as though blown through cracked horns. The cultists pivoted with mechanical precision, ranks of crossbows lifting toward ridges. They had known of the attack. A howl split the sky, coast from high on basalt spire. Wolves erupted across the cliff rim, plunging down in avalanches of fur and muscle, smashing into sentry lines. Arrows sang. Some found fur, but most ribboned past as wolves wove like smoke. John raised Longclaw. For the north, shield walls surged onto the east ramp. Sand exploded from bolt impacts. Men fell, but ranks closed. John, Lyanna at his flank, struck first shields of enemy pike. Clash of metal rang. Wildlings hurled crude grenades of citadel salt into wildfire cauldrons. Green flames choked, then winked to greasy smoke. Archers behind John targeted trebuchet crews. Shafts punctured masks, spilling black blood that steamed where it struck glass. On the western rim, Hallis's crannogmen slithered from vent tunnels, dripping with condensing mist. They slit throats of chemists minding exhaust valves. Seized gearworks, jammed them with swamp mud so pressure built unchecked. Pipes shrieking. Lightning cracked overhead, no cloud in sight. Ghosts' pack herded panicked mules dragging Sega wagons. Beasts careened into scaffolds, demolishing timbers. Wolves darted clear before bronze vats toppled, glass fire pouring like molten emerald, eating through rock in a sizzling roar. John fought up narrow stairs carved into black crystal, and at the top he met the ashen sun. The prince's smile never faltered. He wore no armor, only robe and a gorget of fused dragonglass. In one hand, a slender blade, steel-dyed green, shimmering. In the other, a sphere of transparent glass swirling with storm cloud shadow. "You ride with ghosts," the prince said, voice soft yet carrying. "I wield dawn." John circled, Longclaw's point tracking. "Dawn brings hope. You promise only fire that never ends. Hope is a torch men burn themselves to chase." The prince raised the sphere. "See my gift." Within writhed a living ember, wildfire seed. If hurled to sky, it would burst like a sun egg, scattering sparks to kindle darkness itself. John lunged. Blade met blade. Green sparks flew. The prince's movements were poetry, each parry flowing into riposte. John's North Forge style was brutal, each stroke hammer hard. They circled the dais, glass underfoot cracking. Meanwhile, chaos towered. Pressure pipes ruptured. Geysers of flame spiraled. Wolves poured across walkways, driving cultists over edges into magma pits beneath cooling crust. Lady Lyanna rallied Mormont axemen to break a phalanx, her roar near as savage as any wolf. Hallis Reed's men unrolled nets of woven marsh fibers soaked in salt solution, smothering ignited barrels. Joan's arm ached, sweat stinging eyes. The prince feinted, slashed. Green blade kissed Joan's pauldron, carving shallow groove. John spun away, gauging breath. Wind howled through broken vents, carrying smoke laced with sweet rot. Ghost emerged onto the dais, white specter streaked with soot. The prince laughed, eyes alight. "Perfect. Witness the eclipse." He hurled the glass sphere high. It rose spinning, a miniature sun ascending. Ghost leapt, higher than any beast ought, jaws clamping round the sphere. In midair, the globe shattered. Wildfire ignited, emerald halo blossoming about the wolf. Joan's heart stopped. The blast flung Ghost backwards off the dais, a comet of green fire trailing. John screamed, rushing. Yet before he could reach the edge, a miracle. Ghost rolled mid-fall, spiraling, and vanished into a plume of steam rising from ruptured pipe. The salt-laden vapor, Hallis's sabotage blanketed him. Green flames sputtered, died, leaving only singed fur. Ghost vanished into shadow below. Hope surged like lightning in Jon's veins. He whirled, Longclaw singing. The prince raised his green blade, but Jon's shoulder charged, battering him to the brink. Glass cracked beneath silk-slippered feet. "Night," Jon said, voice like grinding ice, "belongs to wolves." He drove Longclaw through the prince's chest. Dragging glass gorgets shattered, shards spraying. The ashen sun's eyes widened. Surprise eclipsing arrogance. "Light was mine," he whispered. Blood dark as obsidian spilling down robes. Then he pitched back into the roaring crucible below. A thunderous crack rent the air. Molten core lashed skyward. Jon staggered, shielded face. Wolves howled, voices weaving triumph and mourning for brethren fallen. Men shouted to retreat. Glass catwalks collapsed. Fire chased vacuum as every vent blew sky high. Releasing fury caged too long. Jon found Ghost limping but alive, fur charred at shoulders, eyes still blazing. He knelt, pressed brow to Wolf's. Pain radiated but life thrummed brighter still. They fled as Solstice pit imploded behind. A dying sun devouring itself. Ash rained upon desert like black snow. Ember clouds blotted the noon. Yet beyond ruin, true sky shone. Blue so vivid it seemed newborn, washed clean by sacrifice. 3 days later the combined host camped along the Greenblood. Willows dipping peaceful fronds into gentle current. Healing tents buzzed. Citadel healers salve burns. Wolves rested among soldiers, accepted scraps, licked wounds. Sansa arrived by river barge, cloak of pale teal billowing. She embraced Jon fiercely, tears sparkling. "Ravens told us. You ended it." Jon shook his head. "Ended one fire, others smolder." He gazed at Ghost dozing beneath fig tree. "But the pack stands." Banners rose on dawn of the 7th day. Stark Direwolf, Beowulf, Baratheon Stag, Mormont Bear, Hightower Beacon. Men cheered, wolves howled. A single note rolling across dunes and rippling into distant valleys, not of warning nor rage, but of guardianship, renewed. Later, Jon stood upon bluff overlooking sun-kissed river. Arya approached, Nymeria padding silent. They watched rafts of small folk pole toward villages. Spared the nightmare. "What do you see?" Arya asked. "Land still scarred," Jon answered, "but tending its own wounds. Wolves will roam till it is whole." "Bye." Arya smiled, eyes fierce. "Then we roam too." Below, Ghost lifted his head, meeting Jon's gaze with ember-bright eyes. Across their bond flowed a quiet understanding. That night might rise again someday, bearing new horrors. Yet wherever darkness gathered, tooth and claw and human heart would meet it, unbroken. Jon turned northward, toward roads leading home and onward both. The story would continue. Threads of peace, threads of war. But for this breath, the North and its wild kin stood triumphant beneath a sky where stars once more belonged to every creature who looked up with hope. And as the sun dipped west, setting the river aflame with gold, Ghost led a chorus whose echoes carried far beyond the horizon, weaving promise into the bones of every hill and wood. We are the guardians in silence, the watchers in chants, the song between twilight and dawn. Remember us when fear comes creeping, and take heart. For the pack runs still,